Hi all, ACDodd here, and welcome to another episode of On the Road Tuning with me, ACDodd, and this time I've got a deep dive for you. Let's get stuck in. So, out on the road again, and this time we're down in Portsmouth, and we've got a nice racing flame. So this one, lovely little car, nice and original. Well used, but looked after. And under the bonnet, we have a 998 A Plus with a stage 1 kit. And this one is currently a non-runner. So the first thing we've got to do is get this engine running. So what's the story with this car? Well, the owner told me that about 100 miles ago the car was rolling roaded, and he's not used it that much since, simply because it's increasingly got worse and now it won't start. So in only 100 miles, the rolling road operator, who shall remain nameless, has effectively set this car up to fail. So what we're going to do now is dig into that so you can actually see what's been done and why it's not right. Okay, so we've got the spark plugs out. The first thing we can see is someone has fitted a set of BP7s, which is 2 heat ranges out from where this engine should be. It's a fairly standard 998 with a stage 1 kit. I've been informed that that was probably the last rolling road operator that had their pinkies on it. They will remain nameless. The spark plug gaps, as you can see, are way too wide, and also the spark plugs are fouled. And they will be fouled because of the heat range is wrong, and they're not warm enough to burn off any crap. So let's continue having a look at the engine and see what else we can find. So the next thing we find on this engine is someone has removed the ballast coil and fitted a 2.7 ohm high power 3 ohm coil. They've also spent time and tied up and correctly taped up the ballast lead. Why on earth anybody would do that is beyond me, because actually all you're doing is lowering the power of the ignition system, which is an absolutely pointless mod. So what I'm going to do is to look to re-establish the ballast system so that that works properly, and that'll increase the power at the spark plugs, put the ignition back to where it needs to be. We'll put some BP5 spark plugs in it, and this engine should run, or at least start and run, and then we can continue with the tuning. I just cannot believe what some so-called professionals do to cars. They took a perfectly good ignition system, a 1.5 ohm ballast system fitted by the factory, removed that, disconnected the wires, changed it to a full 12 volt supply, and then changed the coil from a 1.5 ohm back to a 3 ohm nominal coil. Why you would do that and actually reduce the coil power in the system is beyond me. That is a complete waste of time and a waste of the customer's money, and actually a retrograde step. The reason why the factories went to a ballast system is so that you can get more power at higher revs on those engines. So the later engines that have higher compression and higher cylinder pressures actually need more power in the ignition system to actually fire that. So effectively what's happened here is someone has changed that, and in this case it was the person who previously rolling roaded it, have changed it, and they've gone from a 1980s ignition system to a 1960s ignition system. So one of the things that you need to understand is just because you take these cars to professionals, it doesn't mean to say the professionals actually know what they're doing. So, moving on, I haven't started the engine yet, but just have a quick look in there. We can see the points gap is virtually, that's fully open, so it's virtually non-existent. So that might have been actually why we haven't necessarily got a starting condition. As to why that is, nobody knows, because apparently it's only done 100 miles since it's been tuned. So again, I'm very suspicious of the previous person that went in there and did the tuning. So we'll put a gap, and then we'll see if we can get this engine running. Okay, so you can see the points gap there was virtually non-existent. I don't buy that the fact that changed since it was set. I think 100 miles ago when that was tuned, that it was either not adjusted or set incorrectly, and as a result it's now closed up, and is likely the reason why that this, or certainly one of the biggest reasons why this was a non-starter. Okay, so we still haven't started it yet because I'm not going to start this engine until I know it's right. So I've taken the top off the carburettor, and the eagle-eyed of you lot will notice that whoever tuned this last time hasn't got a bloody clue what they're doing with tuning SU carbs. So the needle in that is an AAU, which is a stage 1 needle, and clearly the engine's not been running right, so all they've done is they've wound the mixture nut down. Well, guess what? Plugs have failed because they're the wrong ones. Car doesn't start now a year after it was tuned. So that's a classic example of a rolling road operator that doesn't know his arse from his elbow, and he needs some training. That has just been ball washing the cylinders. So what we're going to do before we start this up is reset that to a more sensible height, which is about, we'll start with about 60 thou down from the bridge, and then we'll get the engine going because it should now start, and then we can start to dial it in. Well, where do we start here? So we can see that the attempt to get this car running has just basically been to wind the mixture nut fully down. And unfortunately that has resulted in a very rich mixture, which has effectively fouled the spark plugs. And because those spark plugs were the wrong heat range, they've basically stopped firing along with the points closing up, and the whole thing has just stopped and ceased to run. Now, there was no attempt to either modify the needle or even change the needle. So whoever rolling roaded this car just thought by winding the mixture screw down would be a sensible way to leave it. In actual fact, what they would have done was made that car illegal to drive on the road because of the emissions. And they would have made that car wash its cylinders, and they would have also made that car effectively terrible to drive and very expensive to drive because of the fuel consumption. Okay, so we've moved on. You can see we've got the ignition fitted, got a new set of spark plugs fitted. I've also adjusted the points gap. I've tweaked the timing. We've got 30 degrees full in on the ignition. The advance curve in there is very quick, so this looks like to be an ideal distributor. The needle in the carburetor was an AAU, and in this particular case was absolutely miles out. So as we saw, the jet was wound down to compensate, so I've put an AAF needle in, and that's miles out as well. You can also see I've got the float bowl off, and there's a couple of reasons for that. You can see the disgusting colour of the fuel that's in there. So we've obviously got contaminated fuel. However, the engine is at least running and running cleanly. So I've got good enough fuel to make that run. But what we have got is a leaking needle valve. So we're going to change that. The other thing we've also got is a few maladies, a few bits of wear with the carburetor. So the fueling is kind of rev dependent, and that's because of the wear. Okay, so in terms of the vehicle itself, it had done just about 100,000 miles. So there was a lot of wear on that carburetor. So I had problems with the float chamber flooding. So as you can see, the fuel wasn't the best, but the fuel that was in it was at least running and burning cleanly. So you'll see me in a minute. We'll change the flow jet, and you can actually see the wear. Again, another reason why this was worn, and it was previously rolling roaded only 100 miles ago. How people can do this, not have the spares on the shelf and actually replace these items is beyond me. But anyway, as you'll see, we'll replace it and we'll move on. So the owner tells me this car's done 100,000 miles, and as you can see there, the wear on the tip, great big step. That should be a nice smooth taper. So we're going to change the needle valve in this, and then hopefully that should stop us leaking, because that's what was happening when it was running, and that should also stop some of the variance in the fueling. Okay, so one of the running issues I'm getting, the fueling's actually pretty good all the way up to 5,000 revs on part throttle, but when you open the throttle she goes lean, and the problem here is our piston is rising too quickly. So we're going to put some thicker oil in, and we may even need to change the damper to slow that down. But the whole point is that piston's rising too quickly, which is causing us a lean out. And it manifests itself, you can hear it, it goes flat when you open the throttle. So hopefully that will solve the problem, and we may not even need to modify the needle on this one. Okay, so again, one of the common things there, the previous person who attempted to set this engine up didn't address, or at least made the issue worse by adding thin oil into the dashboard in the mistaken belief that thin oil would make the engine accelerate quicker. Now, coupled with the fact that mixture jet had been wound all the way down, you know, there may have been some truth in that. But the point is, in this particular case, once we made the correct needle for it, the piston was rising far too fast, which was causing a lean out. And that's what happens with the SU. If the piston rises too quick, the depression drops over the jet, you pull off less fuel, and effectively the accelerator pump effect is reduced, so you pull off less fuel. So in this particular case, when you open your throttle, it was going lean. So what I couldn't do is just add thicker oil, because that didn't enrich it enough. Okay, so what I had to do was to use a hybrid arrangement by using a brand new LZX 2085 and then swapping the caps over so I could fit the LZX 285 from the HIF carb series into the HS4 carb, and therefore block the hole up and make it a much slower piston rise. That actually worked a treat, and we brought the mixture back into touch. And that's the point. When you change the oil, or when you're trying to salt the accelerator pump out effect, changing the thickness and the speed affects the actual air-fuel ratio, okay? And you need to be measuring it to actually know what's going on. Just changing the oil, you have no idea what you're doing, and you may be going too rich or too lean. If you measure these things, you can actually get the fueling to go exactly how you want it, and give you the enrichment you need when you demand it. And that's the trick with the SU, is to make it demand sensitive. So where do we get there? We've got this one pretty good. We've got a worn carb, so I've left it worn, but I put a new needle valve in there. I also had to change the piston damper for a LZX 2085, so that's one out of a HIF 44, which I've had to change the top over on and fit it in there, and then obviously that then gives me enough enrichment. So yeah, there was a lot of things that were wrong with this one. It's well out of tune. Obviously it all started off from the fact that the rolling road operator just wound the jet down. So AAF needle, I modified the needle on progression, as I say, sorted out the damper, and we've got an engine that's revs quite well. So I'm going to send the owner out in it and see what they think. In this particular case, they're not going to come on the video, but I'll see if I can get a comment once the video's up and publicised. Okay, so good news is the customer drove the car and he was absolutely blown away with the performance. So he thought the thing was, you know, unbelievable, really, considering the work that we've done. And he also couldn't believe quite how bad, unfortunately, his experience had been on having it set up on the rolling road. So the point of doing this video was just to show people that actually, in reality, it's not as easy as just taking your car to a rolling road. Yes, there are good rolling roads, but there are also a lot of rolling roads who purport to tell you that they know what they're doing, but in reality, they've got no business you know, going anywhere near SU equipped cars for tuning them. So in this particular case, it was a happy ending. No damage was done to the car, and the owner is now able to drive the car and enjoy it as they you know, as you would want them to. So anyway, without further ado, I hope you like that one. I had good feedback on the deep dive, so I'll do some more. And as ever, please like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.